Newtown's core character attributes as displayed on our character trait. We will be responsible for our actions and show respect for each other. We will interact peacefully, productively, and politely. We will be trustworthy and honest and show compassion toward others. Newtown's continued success is contingent upon our ability to persevere to follow through with our commitments, and to stay focused on the greater good.
Thank you. And that brings us to our celebration of excellence, which my guess is why we have some wonderful guests here tonight. Dr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Koo. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. This evening, we are very proud that the work of our staff at two of our schools, Middlegate and Newtown Middle School, are being honored this evening. Remembering Our Heroes, Teaching About Veterans School Recognition program is sponsored by the Connecticut Department of Education and the Office of Veterans Affairs. This evening, we are privileged to have Tom Soddy, Commissioner of Veterans Affairs, as well as Stephen Armstrong, who is here from the Connecticut Department of Education. He is also the past president of the National Council for Social Studies, to present the awards. I also want to thank Donna Randall from Post 202, Jay Madigan, Junior Vice Commander and Legislative Council Member, and Chuck Taylor, Executive Committee Man, Marching Band and PTA Parent, for being here this evening and supporting the recognition of our teachers for their work in honoring our veterans. Before we present the awards, I know Mr. Armstrong would like to say a few words about the program.
I do social studies at the State Department of Ed, so that's my gig. I also have the honor of working on our side on this award. This is the third year that the award has been given. And I want to tell you that we do not give it to every school that applies. And this year we gave it to a total of 6 schools, and 2 of them, as you know, are from this community. So that's a good thing. And I'm not telling you this just to butter, I don't want you to feel good, but, well, you could do that. But I want to tell you in all sincerity that the 2 entries that we got from this community were very fine and very solid entries. And you could tell that from my perspective in reading these is the coolest thing. You could see the interaction between the schools and the veterans. Like some of the applications, they're clearly written either by the school. These 2 were, it's obvious that there's a true community between the 2, which is a great thing. So I'd like to turn this over to the, if it's okay, to the Commissioner of, how do we want to do this? Oh, sorry. I messed up. You told me to do it? Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the American Legion, Post 202 in Newtown, I'd like to introduce Commissioner Tom Soddy. Mr. Tom Soddy was confirmed by the Connecticut General Assembly as the Commissioner of the Department of Veterans Affairs on February 21st, 2018. Commissioner Soddy previously served as Acting Commissioner for the Department from October 2017 through February 2018, and prior served as Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the department. Commissioner Sadai is also a major in the United States Army Reserve. Prior to beginning his service with the Department of Veterans Affairs in May 2015, the Commissioner served for 15 years as an Assistant Attorney General and Special Prosecutor for the state of Connecticut. Commissioner Sadai received his commission as a Judge Advocate, JAG, in the Army Reserves in November 2005. He lives in Danbury with his lovely wife, Valerie Ventura Sadai, and their twins, Sabrina and Jacob. Something else we have in common, twins. Anyway, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Commissioner.
Thank you, Don, for the introduction, and I apologize if I keep turning. I'm not used to having my back to the audience, although having one time been an elected official, I understand I'm supposed to speak to the body. I understand. Thank you so much, not only for the introduction, but for your service to our nation and your continued service to your brother and sister veterans. Madam Chair, Madam Superintendent, Board of Ed members, students, staff, faculty, and veterans. It's truly an honor for me to be able to be here to present these awards to two very deserving schools in the Remembering Our Heroes Teaching About Veterans program. I'm really humbled to serve as Commissioner of the Department of Veterans Affairs because I have the privilege of leading an agency with the mission of serving those who have served. And with those four seemingly simple words comes a great responsibility, as it is only because of those who have served and those who continue to serve in our armed forces that all Americans are able to live in this free and democratic nation, where we may speak our minds, worship as we choose, support or oppose government policies and politicians without fear of oppression. This is something I know all of you understand, but it's something that we must ensure that all people understand and never forget. And the students at Newtown Middle School, let's say Newtown Middle School and Middlegate Elementary School certainly understand the mission of remembering our heroes. Not only by recognizing them, shaking a hand, offering thanks for their service, but truly, in a variety of ways, incorporating the very essence of service into the programs at these schools. Collectively, the students in these two schools held multiple Veterans Day ceremonies with songs and artwork dedicated to our service members, veterans. They studied and wrote about the meaning of service to country. They held a Veterans Day breakfast, followed by a walk of honor through school with veterans, and corresponded with deployed service members from the greater Newtown and Danbury area. I know that all that has taken place will continue because of your service and attention to the mission of supporting our veterans. To those who are in this room, the teachers and staff members and veterans, because everyone has demonstrated a true understanding of what it means to serve. But not only to serve in uniform, but all of you serve. Whether it's an elective office, appointed office, as volunteers in your community, there are many kinds of service. But all of that service is because of those who raised that right hand and took the oath to protect and defend. And we owe them that to ensure that our democracy thrives, so that those who thankfully return from military service can enjoy the democracy that they fought for. It's my honor to be able to present the awards. I'll ask Mr. Armstrong to come up, and I'm going to start with Middlegate Elementary School. I could ask the representatives from Middlegate Elementary to come forward. I don't know who's taking, okay, you're taking pictures. State of Connecticut, Department of Education, and Department of Veterans Affairs Certificate of Distinction presented to Middlegate Elementary School in recognition of excellence of the second annual Remembering Our Heroes Teaching About Veterans program. Signed by myself, Commissioner Thomas J. Sadi, Veterans Affairs, and Miguel Cardona, Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Education. Thank you.
Is it okay if I stand? Is it okay if I move this way? Hi, everybody. If you could feel my heart beating. I wrote a few words I'd like to just share with you. On behalf of Middlegate School, I would like to thank the Connecticut Department of Education and the Office of Veterans Affairs for recognizing Middlegate School for this remarkable award. At our school, from the youngest of ages, we focus on raising awareness for our unsung heroes, our veterans. Many veterans are too humble to seek recognition that they deserve, so we must shine a spotlight on them at least once a year on Veterans Day. If we fail to make that effort, our veterans will remain invisible, and invisible leads to being forgotten. That's just not acceptable. Our children must learn about those brave individuals who made sacrifices defending our country and who have helped preserve our freedom. All children must be taught about the rights, freedoms, privileges, and duties that each of us as Americans have. We cannot take any of this for granted. The lessons in the application that I submitted, called Honoring Veterans, which is the theme for our focus leading up to Veterans Day, covers kindness and growth mindset, citizenship, government, and history. Children become familiar with the 5 branches of the military, the history behind Veterans Day, what a veteran is and their importance, their character traits, and more. The hallways are covered with certificates designed by our students, which includes a photograph of their veteran and a description of their tour of duty. One of my greatest joys is when I see and hear a child standing in front of a certificate pointing and saying, "That is my grandma," or "That is my grandpa." And during our assemblies, all the children have an opportunity to invite a veteran to stand with them center stage to be recognized. Each veteran takes their walk across the red carpet, and they stand next to their child or grandchild to receive their well-deserved applause. The lessons are reinforced throughout the year. Our Constitution Day Assembly is when our children learn about the Constitution. They also learn about it in their classroom. On Flag Day, they learn about the history of our flag, its meaning, and the importance of respecting it. Over the years, I've received feedback from our students and veterans alike. One child once said to his teacher, "Wow, I never knew I lived with a hero in my own house." And then there are the veterans, some who have never spoken about their past experiences to anyone until this event. One veteran once wrote a letter of gratitude to Middlegate School when my granddaughter, Olivia, climbed upon my knee, looked me in the eyes, and she said, "Grandpa, tell me about the war." He said, "My heart almost burst. Tears came to my eyes. No one ever asked." We must listen to the stories of our veterans so that one day we can become their voices and allow their legacy to live on through us and through our children. That's why our ceremonies are so important. Thank you for recognizing Middlegate School. I am truly humbled and honored to represent the many individuals who make this a success. I recognize our veterans, our children, Middlegate families, staff members, custodians, administration, superintendent, Board of Ed members, politicians, American Legion VFW, the Newtown BOE, the Voice, newspaper, and everybody that is here today. This is your award. Thank you.
ask the representatives from Newtown Middle School to please come up. It's a great pleasure on behalf of the State of Connecticut, Department of Education, and Department of Veterans Affairs to present the Certificate of Distinction to Newtown Middle School, in recognition of excellence, second annual Remembering Our Heroes Teaching About Veterans program. Signed by myself, Commissioner Sadi, and Commissioner Cardone. Congratulations.
I'm Sherry Oliver. I am the co-coordinator of the Social Studies Department, and I'm going to tell you the origin of our Veterans Day Assembly. At Newtown Middle School, we've been celebrating veterans since I started teaching 25 years ago. There have been pockets of amazing, beautiful things happening in the classrooms, projects. Mr. San Angelo would take the students to the VFW. There were essays through the VFW and the American Legion, many wonderful things. But we never had a school-wide assembly until Mr. Einhorn approached us and said, we need a school-wide assembly. And so it was a perplexing task to try to figure out how to get about 800 people together, and about 40 veterans usually we have on average. So we decided to split it up. We have 2 assemblies every single year, a breakfast and an assembly after. The assembly is student-led. The essays are written by students. Songs are performed by the chorus and by our orchestra. So it's really beautiful. But the best part of all is that breakfast that we have every single year, where children are able to sit with their local heroes and talk and chat and learn so much. We've had experiences where 2 veterans, I have a particular experience, I'm sorry, I don't remember what year or who it was, but there were 2 veterans from, they were Navy veterans. They were actually on the same ship, in the same battle, and just never knew each other, never met each other before, and at that breakfast were able to connect and meet, and it was very moving. And that is the most special time of my year, every year, that breakfast where I get to see kids talk to veterans and veterans talk to each other. It's absolutely beautiful. So we are so honored and thankful that we're able to give back even just a little bit. So thank you.
Just to add what Mrs. Oliver was talking about, we took it upon ourselves when we were going through. We wanted the students to be able to interact and to learn from veterans at this time. To be able to go through and have an event like this has been very amazing for all parties involved, whether it's the veterans, students, staff, even the PTA. They have been a huge part in making our event such a wonderful success. I had to write down the thank yous because I did not want to forget anybody. I would like to thank the Connecticut Department of Education, Mr. Armstrong, the Office of Veterans Affairs, Mr. Sadi, and the wonderful recognition that you bestowed upon us. This would not have been a reality if it was not for Principal Tom Einhorn, Keith the Dean, who led the chamber orchestras, Mr. Pope, who led the concert choir, the PTA for helping organizing the food, Mr. Einhorn's Executive Secretary, Terry Greenfield, and Mr. Padula for helping with their immense support. And then we have a tremendous amount of teacher volunteers who come through and will help throughout the day. This is an amazing event that happens. I received this email on our second year, and I just want to share a portion of it with you from one of our parents who had students reading essays, but also his father was one of the veterans in the audience. So this gentleman's daughter had written 2 of the essays that they got to read, and their grandfather was able to hear it. And it starts, "My father, a World War II veteran, attended the assembly. You and everyone at the middle school were very accommodating to him since he did not move around that quickly or easily. He had surprised me when he told he wanted to attend the assembly, and I know that he very much enjoyed the experience. I was able to attend last year too, and I remember thinking the essays and the applause for the veterans in attendance were wonderful ways to show their appreciation to the veterans. I wanted to write this email to thank you for the experience, for my father, for my daughters, and for myself. My father passed away this July, and the Veterans Day approaches this year. The memory of the last year's Veterans Day event seems more meaningful. It is one that my family will continue to value for a long time. My father was a humble man who did not look for recognition. But it was important to him to be there last year, and it warms my heart to think about him hearing the essays of his granddaughters and the applause of all those in attendance. Thank you to you and everyone at the middle school who helped to make the event so meaningful. And I thought about this, and to me this is why we do this for the veterans. It is for them that we do this event, and without your service and everyone's service, we would not have the country we have today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, it's particularly touching to hear that letter because I know there's many people that letter represents, and it means a lot to me personally to hear that read as well. I hope everybody can join us with some celebration of cookies, and I think there's some tea and hot water and coffee possibly over there if you'd like to join us for the rest of the meeting for the night. So I invite you to join us and mingle a little bit before we call our meeting back to order.
Yes, your vision is right there. And you know, it's so satisfying. That's why I have fun. I raised 4 children. I did it, but we're going back to costumes at 2:30. They're so They remember like Halloween, they remember like their New Year, they remember, you know.
All right, we're going to bring the meeting back to order. Get some of our other business done this evening. We'll start off with the consent agenda. Are you ready? I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of October 1st, 2018, and the donation to the Newtown School District for Holly School. Ms. Aaron Staker makes the motion, Mr. Crusoe seconds. Is there any questions or discussion on that? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So that motion passes unanimously. That moves us to our public participation. So during the first public participation, the board welcomes commentary regarding items on the agenda. After being recognized, if you'd please come to the front table and begin by stating your name and address for the record. We request that speakers be respectful and limit their comments to not more than 3 minutes. The Board of Education does not discuss personnel items in public or student matters in public. And during the second public participation, commentary may address the agenda or may introduce issues for the board to consider in the future. The board does not engage in dialogue during either public comment period. If you desire more information or answers to specific questions, you can complete the citizen's request for information form that's located on the table with the cookies. So do we have anybody who'd like to come up for public participation? Once, twice, nobody, so we'll close out public participation and move on to reports. So starting with the chair report, I've left at each of your spaces the annual report that we're required to give to the town clerk every year. I don't know that we've often distributed this among board members, but it's something that the chair, the superintendent, and I think the business director put together. So this is the chair report. If you see any glaring issues that you'd like me to consider, let me know. I haven't submitted it yet, so there's time. New board member orientation. The elections are coming up and we'll have some new board members possibly. So we've ordered, the CADE publishes a book that, we've talked in the past about how we would do this orientation. So CADE publishes a really good resource book. I think I might have shared mine with somebody here previously because I don't have it anymore. But we've ordered a few more of those. And then I've been gathering a couple of materials for that purpose. But also, we would like to have a meeting either Thursday, December, what did I say, 12th or 19th, I think we've narrowed it down to at this point, and have Nick Caruso from CABE come in just for some new member orientation and board interactions. So if you could let me know which of those dates work or don't work for you, that would be great. And for our potential new board members too, that would be good to know. Candidates forum is this Thursday in the high school lecture hall for the Board of Education. The PTAs are sponsoring it. So I'm hoping we have a good turnout, 7 p.m. And finally, our next next meeting will be after the election, and so I wish everybody luck who's running for office. And that concludes my report. Dr. Rodriguez, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Koo. As I mentioned to you in my Sunday highlights, along with other superintendents, I have signed on to make a commitment to focus on diminishing absenteeism. Currently, the Connecticut State Department of Education and CERC, which is the State Education Resource Center, is hosting the second symposium to spotlight evidence-based and promising practices and strategies in raising student attendance excuse me, and achievement, and that will take place on November the 14th. I do plan on attending that conference, especially since both our district values and our priorities focus on supporting students not only academically but socially and emotionally, and this certainly aligns well with trying to alleviate or diminish school avoidance and absenteeism through better instructional engagement and relationships and the overall learning environment, of course. I will share with you information about our own strategies that we're implementing in Newtown and the way we will continue to also engage parents on this topic in future meetings. I did send you a website in my Sunday highlights from the Connecticut State Department of Education on equitable partnerships with families. I don't know if you had a chance to kind of go through there. Tons of wonderful resources. I am presenting this to the members of PEAK tomorrow as they continue their work with the district. One section in there, if you noticed, was also around absenteeism and parents' involvement as partners to ensure students do attend school. I do have hard copies of just that section for you. And some, again, just kind of go through the whole website, really some truly outstanding resources that I've already shared with my administrative team, and really aligns with what we're trying to do to align with our district priorities. I know, Dr. Koo, you already mentioned the PTA-sponsored Board of Ed candidate forum on Thursday. I will be beginning that and welcoming the community, and Jay Edwards, who is a high school social studies teacher, will act as our moderator for the evening. Again, I just want to thank PTA President Kristen Bonacci and the other presidents who have helped to coordinate the event and the questions that will be posed to the candidates that evening. I'm hoping this should be an informative event, and we're really hoping for a great turnout from the community. And finally, I just wanted to mention some changes that occurred to the high school grading practices that were implemented recently. And those were implemented to provide consistency in grading across levels and subject areas, which included making sure students have both formative, which are ongoing, and summative assessments. And that was to provide them with information about their progress and their achievement. I have to mention that the goal here was simply to ensure students have similar educational assessment experiences. That's what we hope happens across the district. And Dr. Longabuco did send a note, I know, to all of the families at the high school so that they really had a better understanding of the rationale behind those changes. But again, if you should have any questions, and I know she put this in her letter, I know she's going to talk about it certainly in future presentations when she's here, but don't hesitate to reach out to the high school administration for further information on that. And that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Do we have other committee reports? Oh, questions. Okay, let's start with the questions.
Just to your last point, Lori, should we be waiting till when Kim is here to be having questions in regards to the that whole grading system change?
No, you can actually contact her, or we can bring her in. I know she was going to be here this evening. I may be able to answer some of those questions if you have some. But again, we hope that you reach out to the administration at the high school as well.
Maybe there's some general ones you can possibly answer. With this being, I guess what was the whole thought behind the whole process of doing this pretty much change?
Sure. The whole thought behind it was we were, and this Actually, when I was principal, we were noticing issues where there wasn't consistency across grade levels or subject areas within those grade levels. For example, we hope that all students who are taking English 1 have the same number and quality of assessment so that they're having the same experience, assessment-wise, grade-wise, down the hall from the class that they're in. And that does impact their GPA, obviously. If there are 20 homework assignments and 10 tests in one room and lots of projects, and it's very different in another of the same level and the same subject area, that's a problem. So not only that, one of our priorities is to make sure that we have both formative and summative assessments. So it's not all about the end of the unit test or the final exam. There has to be a lot more formative assessments along the way to be able to monitor and measure improvements and progress. So we wanted to make sure that that was consistent, and this was done through the staff and the department chairs as well. So that's the rationale behind it.
To follow up to that, in regards to, like, was there ever any thought put to maybe just implementing it with the freshmen on up as opposed to making such a change throughout the whole school? So children that are in possibly their junior, senior year, or sophomore year are having such a change from what they're used to, and we've already seen it be an impact to the grades that the children are receiving already, that, you know, whether it's going to be footnoted on their transcripts or some way, you know, be noted that, hey, Newtown is now grading the children differently.
Well, they're not grading differently. And I don't want to use the word change, because this should have been happening all along. When we talk about any teaching consistencies, that should happen. All students should have consistent experiences educationally. We don't want there to be students who have more homework or less homework and are getting graded in the same level in the same subject, because that does impact their GPA. So this isn't really a change. It was really strengthening what should have been in existence all along.
So how would it, you know, I know they can reach out to Kim, but wouldn't it be possibly on a teacher's website or somewhere where they could see how much each of the different things are graded, since there is a percentage thing that was mentioned in Kim's letter?
Yes, you should be able to see that with, just as you always have in Power School, what the percentages are. And I think it's a 60%, 40% with summative versus formative. And all of those within the summatives and within the formatives are really left up to teachers what those assignments are.
I don't want to take up a lot of time. I mean, I still have plenty more questions, so I mean, I don't know if it's just a follow-up with Kim and maybe a future meeting that we can be doing more thorough discussion about this and with this, because I would assume that other board members would have other questions too, and you know, having children in the high school and here, you know, being very active with people in the high school, and this only affecting the high school. Maybe some board members aren't fully aware with what this was, and just being notified with Kim's letter, you know, 2 months into the school system isn't notifying prior to the beginning of it. So, you know, with the change and stuff, I mean, anyway.
So I think Dr. Longobuco, and I can speak on her behalf, would entertain questions as well and would have no problem coming to a meeting beyond the letter.
So if that's something that we would like to include on a future agenda, we can do that. Susan's nodding, so we'll look into doing that at a future agenda. And then you can get more questions answered. You still have some. Any other questions or comments on either the chair report or the superintendent report? No. All right, so let's move on to committee reports. Curriculum and instruction. We have.
C&I met. Met last Tuesday, and in your notes that you received, I'd like to just highlight a few points. NGSS status update, I'd like to call your attention to the bullet of science leaders from K-12 sitting in PD to consider applicability to their level, which is extremely important. PD plans for the 5th of November. There will be many teachers offering guidance to other teachers, as we did last year. District-wide assessment plan. The revised district-wide assessment plan is being implemented to ensure common testing windows. I call your attention to the other bullets that are being addressed by the assistant superintendent and the director of teaching and learning to capitalize on the assessments that we are providing, and also there's consideration with the NWEA in the spring to providing some relief of testing in that particular window by differentiating who actually takes the NWEA in the spring. And then the last SEL update, which is extremely important. There are a number of bulleted items here that I call your attention to. The first, to ensure consistent implementation of second step K through 8, utilizing identified second step lessons at Reed, and then dealing with full value contract, which has been successfully launched at Reed, and now the discussion will ensue about implementing it through the middle school into the high school. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Any further committee work? Liaison activities? Okay, so we'll move on to our presentations. So we'll start with the enrollment. You guys can just wait till the end of the meeting, and then we can do student reports. No, actually, we have another financial report to do too. Okay, so student reports. We have a report from the high school.
Good evening, everybody.
To start off, many sports events.
Can you come? Yeah, let's have you on the microphone so we make sure we all hear you. Thank you.
To start off, many sports events have taken off over the past few weeks. Last Friday, Newtown went up against Shelton High School, one of their rivals, at the away football game and won. The Newtown High School girls swim team hosted their Fight for a Cure night on Friday as well and won the meet. Along with this, senior nights for many sports have taken place or are scheduled for the coming weeks. Girls and boys cross country recently had their senior night on October 2nd as they threw colored powder at each other to match their color run theme. Of course, posting these amazing memories on social media was the highlight. Finally, Newtown High School Band and Guard hosted their outstanding annual home show at the Blue and Gold Stadium, where 7 groups, including Newtown, performed an elaborate routine.
In 2 weeks, the high school will be hosting their Spirit Week. There are many fun and exciting events planned for each day, with America Day on Monday, then Decades Day, then Color Wars, next Costume Day on Halloween, and we end the week with Blue and Gold Day and our prep rally. Along with this, we have our exciting homecoming dance on Monday, November 4th, where plans are being made for the night and tickets will be sold soon, all hosted by student government. Many students are also buying their apparel for the week, and many class councils are also hosting fundraisers for students to buy class Color Wars t-shirts. The seniors are also very motivated this year to win Most Spirited, and we are planning an amazing wall decorating night, filling the halls with spirited wear, and of course getting ready to take pictures in the senior courtyard.
Also, in regards to the new grading system at the high school, which includes a 70% summative and 30% formative grading assignment, meaning tests and bigger projects receive more weight than classwork and homework, the student body now has a standardized grading system throughout all classes.
The students know what to expect in each class and are being held to the same standards, which is very good. However, as many of you know, this has been a very controversial topic among the student body. While the system is very efficient and structured, I believe many students do believe that is not a true representation of their efforts. However, I'm just going to go off script a little bit, but I think that with the new grading system implemented, a lot of the same grading techniques are still there, and the percentages really work out the same when we look at how the grading works, because many teachers either did point systems or percentages beforehand, and I think that was really good about making this the formative and summative. We were able to really get the same kind of language out there for everybody, and it all really works out the same. The only thing is that sometimes teachers have less summative assignments, which is really what's holding people's grades back, and that's where I think the controversy lies. But that's just the note on grading.
It is helpful to know that all teachers are using the same grading practices. Yes, yet we believe that this is an important topic of discussion.
In other news, the school's social emotional learning program is also progressing very well in advisory programs for underclassmen, and capstone preparations are starting for juniors.
Applications for the NICE travel opportunities were recently due, and many students are excited to join the program, either through the school club, travel opportunities, or hosting. The feedback for the new Panama trip, as well as the recurring trips, are being accepted very well by many new students who are willing to learn more about culture.
Next, many seniors are reaching the exciting and nerve-wracking points in senior year when they're submitting their applications to colleges all around the country, and in some cases all around the world. Counselors and students are both working together very diligently to complete this stressful task. Now it's just a matter of hard work, collaboration, and patience as students get ready to submit early applications on November 1st, and some applications are actually due tonight.
Tomorrow is school-wide testing day for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. Freshmen will be taking the PSAT 8 and 9, sophomores will take the pre-ACTs, and juniors will take the actual PSAT. Seniors, much to their delight, don't have to go into school until 11:57 for the last 2 periods of the day. They certainly do deserve to sleep in because of all the stress they have had lately with college applications.
Fall has overall been a very stressful time, as first quarter will be done in 2 weeks now. But this is also bringing a lot of fun and excitement, along with educational opportunities and potential for a great year. Therefore, we look forward to rounding out the first term of the year and all of the learning and celebrations that come with it.
Thank you, very much appreciated. That was a lot of stuff going on. So it's good to hear that the pool is open if we were hosting our first. That's great. And then, are there any questions or comments from board members?
I appreciate you giving your honest feedback about the grading system. I think, that's part of the reason that you're here, is to make sure that we understand the student perspective, and I really appreciate you having the confidence and ability to articulate that so well so that we can get an understanding of the student point of view. So, thanks so much.
Indeed, thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I think you have like 3.5 hours before the end of the night and the applications are actually due, is that right? Not from personal experience, but just you're hearing that that's what, okay. All right. Sure.
I was just thinking, we always have the high school report to us. It would be nice maybe if we could get some of the other schools to come in once in a while and let us know what's going on. I don't know if that's possible or if that's too much to ask or if they're interested, but that would be...
We could look into it.
I'm not, if, maybe once in a while or a rotation or something.
We've got teachers here who can come get the report.
It's funny you say that because I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody else had mentioned that as well. It would be neat to see an elementary school student's report on this or a read or middle school.
So from the audience, for the record, we're getting some comment from a teacher in the audience who says that she as well has heard that that would be a good thing to have voices from other grade levels. So we'll look into that. We'll still have you here. We just want to add to the voices. No, thank you so much for the report. That's very useful to have that feedback. So thank you. That's good. Okay, thank you so much. Again, you're welcome to stay. Okay. All right, so that brings us to the action on the financial report. motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the month ending September 30th, 2019.
Ms. Harriman Stites makes the motion, Mr. Cruzen seconds it, and turn it over to Ms. Vitus.
Good evening. As I'm sure you're aware, September is a very busy month for the business office. As all of our staff has now returned, the payroll department has been handling numerous employee change forms, and in accounts payable, we've processed over 650 transactions for the month. We've written over 325 checks, which is over double our average right now. For the month of September, the Board of Education expended approximately $5.7 million, of which $4 million was on salaries and $1.7 million on all other objects. The main object accounts are all now in a positive balance, as we will begin making budget adjustments and projections sometime this month. One thing I want to point out is that special education, I'm sure you know this, is always a high attention area. And right now, we're currently projecting a negative balance of $224,000 in special education tuition. But keep in mind that this number includes budgeted excess cost grant, which will be recalculated at the end of November and submitted to the state. At that point, we'll have a much better picture of what's going on in that department. And for the month of September, we had 2 emergency repairs that were over $5,000. One was the installation of 2 ductless split AC units for the Reed data closets. These units had failed due to age as they were installed when the school was constructed in 2002. 4 quotes were obtained for this work, and the lowest bid came in at $97.30, and that was McKinney Mechanical. The other repair was a replacement of a flue pipe in the maintenance office. The existing flue pipe was showing signs of corrosion and rot, and for safety reasons, it needed to be replaced. And I have a nice picture of that if you're interested. It was in pretty bad shape, if anybody knows about flue pipes. The new flue pipe is solid stainless steel, so it should last a very long time. The contractor chosen for that job was Connecticut Boiler Repair Company, who is a state-approved contractor. The cost for that job was just over $6,000. And other than that, very short and sweet report. We will be monitoring the budget and keep you apprised of any significant changes and updates. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? Mr. DeLeo?
The 224,000 anticipated deficiency, does that include the money that's in the contingency fund?
No, that does not.
And
That's
also,
just tuition.
And we also put money away, I believe, in our non-lapsing account that's earmarked for special education as well.
Well, we do have the special education contingency and then a non-lapsing account.
But I believe we put, was it
There's
like
67,000.
67,000? So we have 167,000 in the contingency fund plus the non-lapsing earmarked for special education?
No. So there's 100,000 in the budget for contingency. The 67,000 has been transferred to the town for that non-lapsing account. That would be something that we would have to request to get out. It's not just something that we can include as part of our budget.
But that's earmarked for special education.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 224, but we do have 167,000.
We do, but this is a very early number, and it was the same number last year.
Okay.
You just have to keep in mind that the excess cost grant, which is a big part of that, is based on a budget that was built last year. So in November, when all of that's recalculated and all the new students are taken into account, that number will be much less, hopefully, unless we have more investments.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? What was the amount that we anticipate, the 224,000, would that be, can we attribute it to having more students or change in needs, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex account. We can attribute the majority of that to more students. Our enrollment report shows 40 students, and I had some work done on that account today, and we have 5 additional students that were outplaced. We have one that's, on a holding pattern, so there's just a lot going on in that account, and it happens every year this time. And then we have students coming back in as well.
Any other questions? All right, sensing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So that motion passes unanimously. Now brings us to our presentations. So we have the enrollment study first, and then we have a guest.
Yes.
You're proud of?
So as you know, we engaged the help of consultant Peter Prouda, who's with us this evening in putting together our enrollment study that would help inform our decisions moving forward, especially with respect to staffing and other important budgetary considerations. This included an analysis of district enrollment for the past 10 years and a projection into the year 2029 for grades preschool through 12. Just so you know, Peter has worked not only with our district many years ago, but many districts throughout Connecticut, and included in this particular analysis or study, not only a history of enrollment, but contextual information for our district, such as projected town population, new home construction, estimated sales of existing housing, growth in labor force, grade 9 retention, and estimated migration of school-age children. In addition, Peter secured birth rates from the State Department of Public Health by school attendance zone for the period of 2004-2017. I know you all have the presentation, and hopefully you've had a moment to review it, but I would like to thank Peter for being here this evening to review the study with us, and of course to answer any questions that you may have, so thank you.
All right, now we got the microphone. Before I start, let me give you guys a kudos. This is an incredibly well-run meeting. Nick Caruso and I cut our teeth in the Bloomfield Board of Education eons ago, and Nick would be very proud of you. So it's a pleasure to see that. I got a heads up before I came that you wanted to know how I do this. And what I'm going to say is you've had a couple projections done before I came here. H.C. Chung did it back in 2009. Malone and McBroom did it a few years ago. And your own staff gives you annual reports. We all use basically the same methodology, cohort survival. And what that is simply is you look at enrollment 1 year in one grade, and then you look at enrollment the next year, the next grade, and you see what the pattern is. Is the number going up or going down? So if we had 100 kids in grade 2 in 2018, and we had 104 in grade 3 in 2019, you've got a 4% growth rate. And that's due to migration usually. Kids coming moving into town, or it could be kids coming back from public or non-public schools, or kids leaving and go to them. For projecting kindergarten, the typical way to do it is to look at births 5 years earlier. So again, if there were 100 births in 2014, and you had 115 kindergartners in 2019, that would be a 15% growth rate. Now you might wonder why I picked 4% for the in-grade and 15% between birth and kindergarten, is there's 5 years of growth between birth and kindergarten. There's only 1 year growth between one grade 1 year and one grade the next year. So that's the whole method. Everybody uses it. We have the variation you can use is you can look at 1 year history, 3 years of history, 5 years of history. You can weight the history. And that just depends on the patterns you see and the experience you've had. Obviously, the longer the period you look at, if you look at 5 years of history, you're going to get a more solid number because the numbers are going to vary every year. And if you use 3 years of history, you get what's happened more recently. And sometimes when you have small, when I'm dealing with schools as the primary unit, which we did here, I tend to use 5 years because I need more data for stability. So now that I've told you how to do it, and you guys can all go out and do it tomorrow, because all it is, it's Excel. It's an Excel spreadsheet. That's all it is. Let me take you through my presentation. We're going to do enrollment history very quickly. I'm on the next slide, by the way, Tanya. Projections by level, projection factors, contributing factors, prior projections. How do you guys like to do this? I can be interrupted and give you answers, or do you want to wait to the end? Madam Chair?
Yeah, I think we'll wait till the end.
Okay. Right, so that's the pattern of enrollment from 1970 to date. It's about 50 years of enrollment history. What you'll see there is enrollment tends to be cyclic. It is not level, it's not linear. It was going up in the late 60s and reached a little peak in 74. From 74 to looks like 89, it dropped. Then you had a major period of growth from 89 to 2006, and now you're in a down cycle. So I don't worry either about up cycles or down cycles. They're a natural phenomenon. I see it all over the state. Some places the up cycles are a little bigger, some places they're smaller. I will tell you that your growth cycle there from 1988 to 2006 or 7, that was up 66% roughly, and in that same period the state grew 25% only. So you had a huge period of growth. The other pattern I typically see is the earlier peak, the 70s peak. In most cases, if I took all the places I've done, that peak tends to be higher. The later peak in the mid 2000s usually tends to be a little lower. So we've lost from 2007 15,000 kids, 1,500 kids, a lot of kids. It's natural. Your enrollment as of September 3rd, which is what I based this on, was 4,177. The latest data I have last year, you also had 510 kids in non-public schools, which is a lot. It's more than I typically see. You had 15 in regional magnets, a little smaller than I usually see, and 51 in other public schools, which could be our tech schools or your ag centers. Next slide. One of the starting points is what your current enrollment is by grade. And what you see here is you've got this year 245 kids in kindergarten and 441 kids in grade 12. Now when I saw this type of pattern, usually this is a pattern of decline. But what's going on here, as we'll see a little later, is you've got a lot of in-migration, much more than I see in other places, and that's offsetting this to some extent. So the way I do this is if you run the projection against those growth rates from grade to grade I showed you, this kindergarten class of 245 students will have 302 when it enters grade 5 in read, In 2024, 315 when it enters grade 7 at middle school, and 319 when it enters grade 9 at the high school. All except grade 5 are below current enrollment, so what that means is we're going to have an increase starting at the elementary schools, and we'll see that move its way through the system, probably toward after the time period of this report for the upper grades. Total enrollment, next slide, you're there already. Total enrollment went from almost 5,500 in 2009 to 4,177 in 2019. It's a net loss of 1,300 students, roughly 24%. That loss was, when you look at it in 2008 to 2018, I don't have 2019 data available from the state yet for other towns. It'll be available in a month and a half, 6 weeks. You lost 23.5% in the past 10 years. And that was the highest of similar towns, and that's Dirt B, which is pretty high-level socioeconomic communities. And the range of other towns was Greenwich was up 2.3%, and the loss in Monroe was 23.2%. Where do I think we're going? I think we're going to be down 90 kids next year. I see a low somewhere around 39.75 in 2022, and then I see a recovery to 42.73-ish by 2029. So that's going to take you above where you are today in 10 years. So that's where I think we're headed. K to 4. Elementary enrollment peaked at 2,108 students in 2005. Between 2009 and 19, it fell by almost 600 students, 31%. It went from 1915 to 1322 students. So you're down 31% in the last 10 years. State K to 4 is down 11%. And some of the reason is people are just on a little different cycles. I don't worry about this. Next year, elementary. Excuse me. Then you're going to be up around 25 students. I think you'll have close to 70 kids in the elementary school by 2029. Potential gain of 240 students, 18 or 19%. The state K to 4, I think, is going to be down around 4.5, 4.6%. So it looks like you're going up, and it's due to, looks like in-migration. Hawley. You guys asked me to do by school. It's a little unusual. Mostly I do it by grade level. So there's a net bonus you get. Hawley fell 420 students in 2009 to 300 kids in 2016, and then it's remained close to that count for the last 3 years. So Hawley appears not to be declining. Between 2009 and 2019, the school's enrollment declined by 116 students, or roughly 28%. Next year, no significant change. By 2029, a recovery to about 350 students, potential gain of 45 students from current enrollment, 15 to 16%. And if you want to put that in perspective, just follow the line across, and that's going to be the school's enrollment of 2013. Right? So if the school was comfortable in 2013, it's likely going to be pretty comfortable in 2029. Sandy Hook declined from 625 students in 2009 to 337 in 2015, and then rebounded to 368 in 2019. One of the things to note here, it was declining before the event of December 2012. Between 2009 and 19, it fell by almost 260 kids, or 41%, from 625 to 368. It looks like the decline is over there also. Next year, I think 15 to 20 students likely will have very little implication for adjusting class sizes or moving teachers around or anything like that. By 2029, a recovery to 450 students. It's a potential gain of 80 students from current enrollment, up 22%. So in 5 years, in a few years, you're going to have to start looking a little more closely at your internal reports and start monitoring enrollment by grade to make sure you stay inside your class size limits. Middlegate went from 495 to 354, decline of 29%. Next year, up 15 to 20 students to 2029, should take us to 445, potential gain of 90 students, and current enrollment up 26%. And the 445 is again going to take you back somewhere around the enrollment 2012. Again, there's no big jump here. You just have to monitor the work done by your business office, look at your projections, look where you want to be relative to your contract and your board's class size policies, and make your adjustments. Caddo Meadow, 375 down to 270, and then had a little rebound to 296. So that's the decline has ended. It appears to have ended at Caddo Meadow. You lost 79 students in the past 10 years, 21%. I think next year is going to be maybe a slight loss, pretty close to what you are today. 2029, I don't see as big a growth here. 320 students, potential gain, 25 students, 8 to 9%. Again, I don't expect you're going to have to make many changes there. That takes me to Reed Intermediate. Enrollment grew to 895 in 2010. That was your peak year. You're down to 562 this year, which is about 35% less than 10 years ago. The state enrollment decline in grades 5 to 6 was roughly 8%. Next year, I see you up about 25 students. Relatively slow continued growth to about 695 in 2029. Net 10-year change about 130 or 24%. In this interval, the state is expected to decline roughly 10% in these grades. Middle school. It fell from 896 students to 684. Loss of 24%, state declined 5.6. You got a couple more years of decline at the middle school. 50 kids down next year, a low of around 580 in 2021, and then a rebound of 650 in 29 overall, minus 5%, state decline, minus 9.8. The only advice I'd give you there is you're going to lose 100 kids over the next 2 years, or roughly that, which might tempt you to make some staffing adjustments. Look long term. I don't think you should, maybe you should absorb the expense of having a little smaller class size for 1 or 2 years, as opposed to letting someone go and then having to bring someone in a new person in 3 or 4 years down the line. So on that one, I'd like you to look a little long-term, unless you get some severe budget pressures next year and the year after. High school. Enrollment grew from 1731 to a peak of 1764 in 2012, and then declined to 1533. Net loss of about 200 students overall, 11.4%. State 9 through 12 lost 4.9 in that period. Whereas the high school, a little different problem. We're going to have a decline, it looks like, through 2025. I expect a low of somewhere around 1,200 students in that year. And then I see enrollment starting to recover. A net loss to 2029 of 240 students. Statewide is supposed to decline 9.3. The 240 students would be 16%. That's going to be trickier when you want monitoring staff because you're going to have, it's going to take a while to get back to current levels. But you might want to look a little long term on that. All right, so I'll go to births and sort of explains what's happened here. Birth trended upward from 1980 to 1997 and then started to decline. You had a peak of 372 births in 1997. And the low was 166 births in 2013. That's down 200 births. That's a heck of a change. There were 217 births in 2018. That looks right now like a little bit of an anomaly. When I look at births, in-state births through June, it looks like we're going to be somewhere around 190 in 2019. And then the projection in the year 2025 to 2029 is based on an average of 209 births in the 2020 through 24 period. How do I get this? I'm not peaking in veterans. What I do is I use the state, Connecticut State Data Center has projections out. They ran projections in 2017. They have your population by 5-year age groups growing out to 2035, 2040. I take a look at women of childbearing age 15 through 44. And then I look at the changes in fertility. I don't remember whether I did it for the DERG towns or your town in particular, probably your town. And I make a guess, an estimate of how many births are going to be out there. And I project off the most recent data that I have. So it looks like births now, the decline appears to be over there for you, although that was one heck of a decline, and it now looks like it's starting to come back. Birth to kindergarten growth. Okay, so what you had here is an introduction to full-day kindergarten in 2013, and you ask yourself, did that make a difference? And so you look at the light numbers before then, and then you look at the growth between birth and kindergarten afterwards, and what it does, or what it did, was it changed people's decision as when they entered the Newtown public schools. People could afford it, would find an all-day kindergarten for their kids somewhere else, and then they would come back here in 2000 in first grade. Now, that's the type of thing when you're doing projections where your business office has to be in coordination with the rest of you. Let me give you an idea of what can change your projection. You have to know it, and you have to be able to make the adjustment. Birth decay is a big deal when you offer full-day kindergarten. That is now built in. You've got enough history there so that we can look at it and move forward. We're using a district-wide average of 133%. The range across your elementary schools was 130. At Sandy Hook to 145 at Edo Meadow, was pretty pleased that that lined up pretty well. I wouldn't see any reason why a different neighborhood would have a different growth rate here. So the other type of things that I've seen over the years that you're, when you're doing projections, and these are policy changes that can affect projections and have to be made immediately. The other one I've seen is change in who's defined as a ninth grader. It used to be people retain 5% of the ninth graders, and it's pretty much universally now 0. There are very few affluent communities, almost down to middle affluent communities, that retain kids in grade 9, and the dropout rate has gone down, so there could be other policies that, maybe your board implemented a policy on dropout rates or dropout prevention, and that's made a difference. Grade to grade growth rate. This is what's driving you in this town a lot, in addition to the increased births. This is families with young kids moving in. Now think about your housing, when it was built, when the parents first came here, and you have a life cycle of community. I don't study this, but if you think about it, it's logical. New houses are built, people move in, they love it here, and then you get to my age, and somehow the blood thins out, and they have to go to Florida. And what that does is, for years, you have a house. When the family is averaging age 50 to 70, nobody's moving into that house. It's just locked. And so you have to know when it's opening up. And so the life cycle of the community, which I don't have and I don't use in my analysis, but it's something if you've got to make a major policy decision that you might want to look at. And that's the number of people at certain age groups and how many you might expect to move and what the pattern looked like a few years ago. So to follow this, let me give you how to read this. We've got the red and green lines, which are the highs and lows over the past 10 years. You've got it's supposed to be a diamond, I believe, that is the 2019 rate, and then you have the X, which is what I use to grow the projection. So what do you notice there? Most of the X's are above 1.0. Means you've got in-migration. Grade 9, it's below 1.0. What happens there? Kids decide to go to private schools. Not surprising there. Let me give you how to read this. I picked grade 2. I just started that. Grade 2 was based on a growth of 1.044 between grade 1 the prior year and then grade 2 the next year. In 2019, that growth was 1.023. The highest growth observed over the past 10 years was 1.09, and the lowest growth was 0.942. And that 942 can be directly attributed to the December 2012 incident. Now what you notice here is, growth is random. It's going to be 4%, but what does that mean? It can mean 1 year it's 1%, 1 year it's 6%, and you just never know. If you're doing a projection and using this method, the narrower that band, the better the projection is going to become. Because what that means is there's great stability in the town. The wider the band means things are happening, and it could be housing, it could be a new industry opening or an industry closing, things like that. The projection rates in grades 1 to 12 averaged, a 2.3% growth per year. And when you compound that, if you think you're doing a projection over 10 years, it's going to be over a 20% growth rate, just brought in by migration. The rate in 2019 is a little lower than that, 1.018, and the 20-year median was 1.014. So the projection is based on, it's a little aggressive because the average growth rate's a little higher. I can't tell you whether it's going to stay that way for the next 10 years. My gut says it'll ease a little bit. Town population growth. Now we're getting into some fun stuff outside the school. This is not by me, this is Census Bureau. It's maybe a little hokey, I'm not sure. They estimate population at the county level. It's the smallest level they estimate it on, and then they get a town estimate by looking at the relative number of new housing units within the county. And what they think is going to be happening is, or what has happened, is you grew by 0.66 over the past 8 years. That's a total growth, not an average growth. The state has declined by almost 0.2. Fairfield County has grown by 2.6 the past 8 years. And similar communities, socioeconomic level communities, up by roughly 0.9. Net new housing units, something's going on down here. Net new housing units ranged from 2 in 2012 to, remember we had that crisis in 2010 to 2012. No one was building then. So that's why you see low numbers then. And it's now up to 63. My projection assumes, it looked at the average of the past 5 years. That was 38 net new housing units. Obviously, if someone comes in and says we want to build to 200 units, you pay attention, but remember they're not building 200 units tomorrow. They're getting permits for it. It takes time to build. It takes time to build each individual unit. The other thing you can do is you can take a look at, or have your town require them to do an analysis. I mean, we could take a look at another housing development that might be comparable, 4-bedroom colonials of 3,000 square feet or whatever the current size is. And then you could look at your enrollment data from when that was first permitted to when the houses were given COs to when the school system got kids. And people tend to panic when they hear this is going to happen. I don't panic, it takes time, and you've already got basically 38 units built in to the projection every year. So if someone told me there's going to be a new housing development of 40 units next year, I'd go, oh. Now the other thing that you might not consider is, at least down my way, you're building a lot of housing for 55 and older. And they'll be building 2-3 bedroom, very fancy condos for people to move in. And you go, it's for 55 years and older. That's not going to affect me. Yes, it is. Because those folks are going to move from your town and surrounding towns. And that house that they were staying in, now there's another opportunity. And they may be moving from their house to the new condo or that facility. So again, if you have a major policy decision to make, opening the school, closing the school, things like that, redistricting schools, take a look at that and find out from who's ever building that unit where the people are coming from. Find out what proportion are from your town, and that'll give you a heads up on that. Estimated sales of single-family homes and condos. I get this from the Warren Group. It's a standard source for everybody. It ranged from a low of 219 in 2011. Not surprisingly, again, the recession, nothing happened then. 290 in 2016. There were 360 sales in 2018. My projection assumes 373 sales over the 5-year period. So again, you can watch your housing sales. We assume roughly 373. If it goes above that, a lot above it, and maybe an early warning system thing. If it goes well below it, it means probably lower migration, and probably my projection's going to be a little high. You guys lose a lot of kids to non-public schools. 9%, which is what was, when you look at where all Newtown students go, 9% go to non-public. 4 and 5 is more typical of the towns I look at. The number there is gone from 622 down to 431, and that is fairly typical. Enrollment in other public schools, not as much of this here as around the Hartford area. It grew from 95 to 105 in 2009, and now you're down to 66. My guess is the bloom is off the rose on that. There's probably some good things going on right here. Student migration, again, what we look at is what's happening, Newtown residents. I don't take into account non-public schools, but within the public schools, you range from a high of plus 4.6, which is good immigration. That's 16, 17, to minus 1.4% between 12 and 13. In 2019, the figure is 1.6%. In the 5-year look-back period, migration is a high 2.5%. The median rate over the past 20 years is 1.6. So we're on a high, we're projecting off a high. To me, what that means is, if I were to make a guess, my projection will be a little more optimistic than pessimistic. Now, one of the things you learn in the business is we're all using the same methods, and it's not the method, it's very rare we screw it up or miss something. It's the town and what's going on in the town and the migration and what you guys are doing in the board and how you're presenting your schools to your people. So when you look at all the other projections you've done, and I think 2007 was one I did, you had H.C. Chung in 2009, you had Malone and LeBrun in 2013, and then you see mine in 2019, and what you see is each of these different projections, the 3 earlier ones, pretty much tracked where enrollment was. The worst one looks like mine, but in my defense, 2010 happened there. And one of the things you learn is you do not try to predict where the economy is going. That's a fool's errand. What we're looking at is we're assuming that the last 5 years are fairly representative of the community, and we're applying what happened then to the next 10. I'm not trying to project the results of an election. I'm not trying to project the stock market. I'm not trying to project how many houses will be built. I'm just looking at, and everybody does this, what happened recently and assume that's going to happen again. That's it for the formal part of my report. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Everybody's hand goes up. Does anybody have any questions?
At least the heads didn't go down. All right, you've got my phone number. If you have questions, okay, go ahead.
One thing I noticed was the state is, in your report you say the state is estimated to go down pretty much. The state enrollment's going to go down.
Right.
But we're going up.
Yep.
And also, but historically we've underperformed the state. Our enrollment's gone down faster than the state. Is that right?
Where is that? No. If you, Tanya, can you pull up the enrollment from 1970 to date? Can you get back to that one? It's toward the beginning, and keep going. I think it's 3 into that one. Back one. Right. The solid line there on the diagram is what the state has done. And so what you see there is in the 70s and 80s, you pretty much followed the state pattern. The state went down, you went down. You didn't go down as much. So it didn't affect you. And then you see how fairly level the state pattern is there? I mean, there's a period of growth, just like you had a period of growth, but your period of growth just knocked the socks off. That's pretty high rate of growth. And now, what's happening now is you're coming off that high period of growth. And so the decline's a little steeper. But if you look where the state line is, which is somewhere about 3,200 kids, if you had followed the state pattern since 1970, your enrollment would be 3,200 kids as opposed to 4,200 kids. So yeah, you've outperformed the state everywhere. And when you have a good community, a place people want to move, that's typical that I see.
Do you have another question? Go ahead.
Can you explain to me one more time how like a kindergarten class goes from 245 kids in kindergarten to 308 kids in 4th grade or 5th grade? So if I follow that cohort from now and then 5 years in the future, that cohort grew by 100 kids.
Okay, what I'm going to ask you to do is, do they have the report? Do they have the full report?
Yes.
Right, go to the full report, and there's an appendix. And it's going to show enrollment by grade by year. Take your finger and follow first kindergarten 1 year, 1st grade the next year, 2nd grade the year after that, 3rd grade the third year after that, 4th grade the year after that. I think you'll find your answer. And it's going to happen through low grades.
I'm just wondering how it happens. I guess that's my question, and maybe that's just the statistics.
Desirable community, it's in migration.
Okay.
It's kids moving into town.
Okay.
Families with young children moving in, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Clark?
When you mentioned births in one of your slides, that's just for Newtown?
Yes.
Sort of piggybacking off what my partner here, Dan, was mentioning. So the migration, that's where I'm sort of a little confused too with, if we're averaging roughly about 250 kids for K through 3rd currently, but yet on your chart you have, and that's not even, or barely 500 students when you combine 2 grades at Reed, but you have every year almost 600 kids. So is there a jump there too from 4th to 5th grade of 100 kids that you're projecting?
I'd have to run and set my computer up to see. But what you're going to see is in every grade in the projection, on average, a 2% increase per year. So you've got roughly 300 kids per grade, somewhere around there. Enrollment by grade, 245 up to 40. So if you take 300 kids per grade.
But we don't have, we have 245 in kindergarten right now.
Up to 400 something. Yeah.
But like to 3rd grade, like it's pretty flat between now and 3rd grade. Yes, there's an anomaly of 290 in 4th grade, but if I just knock that out, you really barely have 250 as an average. I don't know, being too specific about a question, I'm just curious of how...
No, it is migration, and it's the whole thing that your financial advisor tells you about compound interest rates and contributing to your 401. It builds year by year by year, and it works like compound interest. And you're compounding in this projection of 2.3% per grade per year, and that will grow your enrollment. You don't think so?
No, I have one
Okay,
other question.
okay, go.
Go ahead.
I know we're not really, I was curious if the town's health or property taxes or things like that are factored into enrollment projections and things, you know, like how a town overall is actually doing. I'm not saying we're doing good, bad, I'm just curious if those outside things factor into your projections.
It's an out, all right. So the key question that you want the answer to, and I don't know it, the answer, is why do people move to Newtown? All right? And affordable housing, I mean, everything's expensive down this way, but more affordable than Fairfield County, certainly. So quality schools. If you're going to spend as much as you have to spend for a house, you're going to look for a quality school. Everything that makes your community your community. All those things. I think the people to ask, quite frankly, if you want the answer to that, is get your 5 best real estate agents, 5 best real estate salespeople here who cover more than one town, and ask them, why Newtown? I think that's the way I'd go through it and find out. Yeah, people are going to look at that. The other way to do it is ask yourself what made you move to Newtown. Were you standing there with a spreadsheet going, is my house going to appreciate this amount, 3% versus 2.8% in Shelton or where else? And what are the SAT scores of the schools? What are my taxes? How much have taxes grown? What are my community services? Is there a pool? Are there athletic fields? Are there hiking trails? Everything that makes the town a town.
Can I ask you a follow-up on that?
Sure.
Just in that, do you call it a persistence ratio?
That's one, yeah.
So
Grade to grade growth rate, yeah. Same thing.
when you compare new towns to other towns, I mean, it's,
You're solid.
yeah.
It's a good rate right now.
Which is an indication of the in-migration in part.
What my guess is you're going to find a turnover in housing, and you're going to find a lot of families with no children being replaced by families with children, and they heard about Newtown and they like it.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Sykes.
So I was looking at the accuracy of the prior projections.
Mhm.
We've talked a lot about the Malone-McBroom report in previous years. And we can see too that the Chung report, they both come far below where we are now. So I'm just wondering if that's sort of a trend that you've been seeing, that former projections.
All right, let's, let me defend my colleagues here.
No, I'm not looking for a difference. It's
No.
almost
Let's,
looking
all
to
right,
know
and
if-
what you have to know is let's think what's happened. Let me first
That's
talk,
actually more my question.
talk
What's
about
happened to
HC's
impact that?
report. HC's report was done in 2009. 1 year after he did that, we had an incredible recession that Connecticut still hasn't recovered from. Remember, our student, our state population is still down from 2010. We have not recovered. One of the few states who haven't recovered. So was H.C. Chung sitting there when he's doing his projection going, geez, I wonder if we're going to have the worst recession since the 1930s. No, he wasn't. He was looking at what was happening in 2005 to 2009 and going on there. And look what he did. He got the downward trend, but the recession exacerbated that. Now, for some reason, I don't know what Malone and McBroom, they're projection's pretty much tracking your enrollment. So I don't know what, I mean, I'm glad you came to me, but their projection's pretty good, isn't it?
No,
it's low.
they're actually the ones that
They're the
down.
lowest.
They were trending much higher than what they had projected. Whereas
They were right on, when did they do that?
For a while.
2013, and they were good through, what, about 16? And now you've had a recovery.
Right, so they projected that our decline was going to be much deeper
Right.
and for much longer.
Right.
So I'm just kind of wondering what maybe has led to that.
Do you recall, right, this is how you handle events. You guys had a catastrophic event in December of 2012. And so the question is, in their projection, what did they do? And there are a couple ways you could handle that, and I'm looking at hindsight. You could say the event happened. Obviously, I hate to bring this up, you lost second graders the next year. You have to make an adjustment between the first and second grade growth rate or persistent rate, and that should have been done. And if that wasn't done, that will cause their projection to run low. So I mean, these are good professionals. I know Mike Zuba, and he's a good guy. He goes into a lot of tough situations. He has a nice Kevlar vest because he goes there when people want to open and close schools. So the question is how he handled that. Now the next question you have to ask is, you have the absolute results of what happened that year, but then you had kids leave Newtown and they went over to, is it Monroe, for a few years until you built your new school. 4 years, I think? Somewhere, 3 or 4 years? 3 years. All right, so now some parents might not be comfortable with that arrangement. Now, you and I know that that is still a good school, still with the same teachers, same quality education, but it happened to be across a border. I mean, good Lord, it's across a border in Connecticut. It's just about as bad as the southern border in the U.S. going across. So that could have affected things, and I don't know whether they thought there was going to be a decline. That's a legitimate policy call on their part, or it might have rebounded. I don't even know. I didn't look at it because it's past the time I'm looking at.
Right, I mean, it looks like that time period, all of the projections were pretty close.
Right.
It's not until the last few years, I think, that we saw that our enrollment started to rebound and the decline kind of evened off a little bit. So I guess I just wanted to know, obviously I think we all know what happened in 2010, 12, 13,
Right.
but I'm just wondering, Newtown in comparison to other like towns, have other towns seen that the enrollment decline that they were anticipating was less steep and started to rebound quicker?
The projections I made before 2000, well, up to 2010, pretty much all fell short. We just didn't anticipate that. And you just never know when the recovery is going to, I mean, think about the times. You just never know when the recovery is going to happen. And you have to, I mean, when I'm doing a projection for school construction, for example, I have to rely on observed data. I can't go, oh yeah, I like Obama, he's going to fix this in a year. I can't do that. And I have to just look at the number from 10 to 11, 11 to 12. And if you're projecting in that time, nobody's projection is going to be good. And I'm looking, your business office does what, 1 year projections? I mean, 5 year, and they've been pretty good. I mean, she showed me, kind of showed me how they're doing. I like them. So they're doing a good job for you. And I like the way you're doing it. You're using them for most years. Actually, I don't like the way you're doing it. I don't make any money. But it's a good way to do it. I would not take Lone and McBroom off your list, off your bidders list. I'll come in cheaper, but they'll be here longer than I will doing this. They're still good. They're quality people, and their project and their work is top notch.
Any other questions? So I think if we do have questions, we can
You've got my number.
send them through you or through me.
Tanya literally has my number in more ways.
Okay. All right.
Run them through her, and I'll get them back to you
Okay.
pretty much as quick as possible.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For being here.
Is it possible for an audience member to ask a question?
No, I don't want to. I think if you have a question, you can submit it to us and we'll submit it later. I think that would be the proper way to do it, just so we don't have audience participation in any of our endeavors. But we will, if you submit the question, we will get an answer for it. And then we have another report. So we have the district-wide student performance review. Thank you, Dr. Crowder, for making the trip here and sharing your insights with us. Move on to the student performance overview.
So one of our priorities, as you know, across the district is to focus on student learning and achievement, not only through the lens of standardized test scores, but in all academic areas. And already with the hiring of Dr. Picaro, who is our Director of Teaching and Learning, not only are we looking at where we've been, but more importantly, where we're moving and what we need to do specifically in every building and at every grade level in order to make improvements, and those improvements that will be sustained in the years ahead. We do have much to celebrate, and I hope that you see that this evening. I think you will agree that our SAT scores, ultimately our students are achieving and going off to competitive colleges and universities. We have begun to fully focus our curriculum to align with concept-based learning, as you know, and I've spoken a great deal about that for the last 2 years, integrated our NGSS, our new science standards, and aligned our instruction with Common Core standards that is assessed through SBAC. I have to tell you, and I know we've mentioned this before, the learning walks alone that have already been established by Mrs. Uberti and Dr. Picaro just this year are already starting to support our principals in their ability to look critically at instruction at the classroom level, and I think that's extremely important. And assessing what larger teaching and learning themes related to concept-based curriculum and are evident, and those that need tweaking and transformation, or even better translation across our wider scope of grade levels and subject areas. Tonight, Mrs. Uberti will be presenting student performance information, and I know we've done this every year, focused on our standardized tests, things like SBAC and AP and SAT. But I just hope you also know that there's a much larger picture that exists here, especially the outstanding work that takes place every day in our classrooms by excellent teachers across our district. We want all students to feel they can and will be successful with support at the younger grade levels, and with the what I call emerging independence later on, which is why I think our capstone at the high school will ultimately prove to be a meaningful summative assessment of what our students know and can do before they leave us to college and career. So with that being said, just a brief introduction. Mrs. Uberti, you're on.
Thank you,
Dr. Rodriguez. Okay, thank you everyone. Tonight we will take some time to review our student performance data from the last school year, 2018-2019. This type of presentation is challenging because while the data shared represents some of the more important standardized test data that we collect, it really is only a fraction of literally the thousands of data points that are collected on students every year. And although it is cliche, no one test defines the achievement, or more importantly, the potential of a student. Furthermore, there are multiple ways to look at the state assessment, some of which are better for some purposes than others, and a large focus of Mr. Piccaro's and my work has been to closely analyze our results from a variety of perspectives and to provide support for our administrative team to not only interpret the results, but to create solid action plans because of those results. The Smarter Balance assessments in the areas of English Language Arts and Mathematics are aligned to the Common Core state standards. Smarter Balance is administered to students in grades 3 through 8. The SAT, created by the College Board, is utilized as the annual state assessment for 11th graders in Connecticut in the areas of literacy and mathematics. The Next Generation Science Standards Assessment, or better known as NGSS, was administered for the first time in the spring of 2019 to students in grades 5, 8, and 11 in the area of science. Results from the Smarter Balance assessment are reported among performance levels 1 through 4, from 1 does not meet the achievement level to 4, which is exceeding the achievement level. This table represents the combined achievement level for each grade, 3 through 8, along with the percentage of students meeting or exceeding the expected performance in 2018 and 2019. The combined average for Newtown from 2018 to 2019, which is highlighted in yellow, is almost exactly the same, with 74% of students having met the expected achievement level in 2018 and 74.3 meeting it in 2019. Similarly, this table displays the same type of data for student results on the math section of the test. You go to the next page. It might not be the next page. Nope, go back. Again, the combined achievement level for each grade, 3 through 8, is shown along with the percentage of students meeting or exceeding the expected performance in 2018 and 2019. The combined average for Newtown from 2018 to 2019, in this case, is exactly the same, with 67.4% of students having met the expected achievement level in 2018 and 19. On the next slide, or actually the next two slides, you will see the rough cohort performance comparison over the past 4 years on the Smarter Balance summative assessment. The first slide is for ELA, and to interpret this slide, you can start with a particular grade in the first column of 2019, and then follow the colors through the previous years to track performance back of a particular cohort from grade to grade. Keep in mind this is not a matched cohort, meaning that the students represented in these numbers may not be exactly the same students from year to year, as students may have moved in or out of the district. So the first table is for ELA, and the second table is for math. Just so you know, I'm going to kind of quickly go through the different tables and then give some summaries and takeaways at the end. The next table is the result, our first result, from the NGSS assessment. Again, it was administered for the first time to students in grades 5, 8, and 11 in the 18-19 school year. And at this time, performance level and individual results have been released to individual school districts. However, state and district comparison data is not yet available. But as you know, this has been an area of focus, a significant focus really, for the past 2 years, and we are very encouraged by the initial results. Next, we will move on to the high school. So in 11th grade, students participate in the Connecticut School Day SAT annually during the month of March. Participation rate for 2019 was 96.4. In this table, you can see the percentage of students who either met or exceeded the desired outcome for both 2018 and 2019. And you can see that there was a significant increase in performance in both ELA and math between those 2 years. The table also provides comparative data for state results. And again, I know on your papers it's not in color, but on the slide you can see it's highlighted in yellow, the current result, which was a significant growth. The next table for AP growth, although advanced placement tests are not state mandated tests, I've included this information because it is another important reflection of the cumulative educational experience of students in Newtown Public Schools. This table shows 4-year AP growth for Newtown Public School students taking AP. Again, this is very positive data, as you can see that in 2016, 742 exams were taken by 389 testers, and 619 exams had scores of 3 or higher. The total number of exams increased by 12% in 2019. The number of testers increased by 16%, and the number of exams with scores of 3 or higher increased by 7%. Although very encouraging, all of this is very encouraging, especially considering that enrollment has been decreasing. Next, we are going to take a look at how our performance compares to other school districts in our DIRG, which is DIRG B. The first slide is the performance of all grades combined percent at levels 3 or above for ELA. And as you can see, we are in the lower third of our DIRG in ELA. And the next slide is the same data reflective of our performance in math. And again, it's all grades combined, percentage of students performing at or above level 3. And while we are performing lower in the DIRG on the Smarter Balance in grades 3 through 8, the next slide highlights that our high school students are demonstrating, again, that their experience in Newtown Public Schools is providing them the opportunity to perform at high levels, not only on APs, but also on SAT, as we are at the top of our DIRG in literacy and near the top in math. So what are the takeaways from our performance on these different assessments? While there are some shifts in the rough cohort performance over time, average student performance in grades 3 through 8 remain fairly, if not very, flat when you look at those total numbers. And overall, Newtown students perform higher in ELA than in mathematics, which is consistent with prior years. It's consistent with state trends, and it is also consistent with DIRG results. And although our overall performance is lower than ELA, our student performance exceeds state performance and remains fairly consistent within DIRG B. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there are literally an endless amount of ways to look at this data. You can actually go on edsite.com, which is the public site to view not only our data, but the data of all school districts across the state, and you can really manipulate it a million different ways. So one of the biggest challenges for me tonight was to decide what to choose to share with you, what would be most meaningful for you, and what would be digestible in one sitting. So although it's not included in this report, we have the ability to also look at growth reports, and data from growth reports suggests that students in level 2 have the lowest percentage of students achieving their growth targets, while students in levels 3 and 4 have the highest percentage of students achieving their growth targets, which I think is important to know. Our subgroup performance follows the trend of Newtown in the state. It also remains fairly flat. And finally, our rough cohort data indicates that when performance dips in a given year, there is some correction in the following year. So it kind of goes up and down, but then it seems to even out. Regarding the SAT, 401 11th grade students took the SAT, and again, I mentioned our participation rate was 96.4. Scores increased in both literacy and math. And I wanted to mention that there are significant differences between the design and the delivery of the Smarter Balance and the SAT. There's been, I was kind of digging to see what types of studies are out there that discusses the relationship. There was an initial study conducted at the state level that indicates there is a moderate relationship between performance on the 8th grade Smarter Balance and the 8-9 PSAT. Mostly when you're looking at the results of students who may be in need of academic support. I pretty much mentioned the findings for NGSS. We don't have comparable data, but we are cautiously optimistic about the results that we do have, and we are still undergoing efforts to update our science curriculum and adjust instructional practices. So we are eagerly anticipating a deeper view into these results as they become available. And the AP summary findings I already shared. We've done well, and our student performance is improving on those assessments as well. And while not an assessment, I thought it was appropriate to acknowledge the recognition Newtown High School received by U.S. News and World Report, being ranked as a number 19 school among Connecticut high schools and number 859 nationally. Similarly, they were ranked 27th by niche among 206 high schools in Connecticut. These outlets use their own metrics to arrive at these rankings, but I think it's safe to say that it is worth an honorable mention and certainly is an indicator of overall performance in our schools. So the results of these assessments are useful for reporting individual performance, but as a district, how we use the data to strategically plan for curriculum instruction moving forward really becomes our priority. So our next steps, I've summarized here, include the following, and most of these are already underway. Providing specific guidance and hands-on support for administrators, teachers, and teacher leaders in utilizing NWEA, PSAT, SAT, and AP results to guide instruction for individual students in small groups. Assisting administrators in developing appropriate, rigorous, attainable goals around student performance. Ensuring a continuum of tiered supports is implemented with Fidelity K-12. In order to ensure valid data comparisons, implementing consistent testing windows throughout the district for state-mandated tests, conducting a vertical review of curriculum-based assessments in both ELA and mathematics, collecting and analyzing data on K-12 instructional practices through routine learning walks, which Dr. Rodriguez mentioned, providing ongoing professional development for teachers related to the Common Core Standards, NGSS, and the related state assessments. Continue to develop, update, and implement concept-based curriculum that is aligned to the Common Core Standards. Continue to develop and implement revised NGSS-aligned science curriculum, and continue to implement social and emotional learning curriculum that focuses on the whole child. When the leadership data is reviewing, when the leadership team, I say leadership data? When the leadership team is reviewing this data, one of our mantras is that data doesn't give the answers, it helps us ask the questions. And these are the questions we are asking as we continually review not only this data, but other data we are collecting on student performance. Are we keeping the data in perspective? Are we using data to look at the bigger picture? Are we using data to guide improvement? Do we view qualitative data as much as quantitative? And if so, what types of qualitative data should we collect to better inform the bigger picture? So in closing, we believe, as Dr. Rodriguez said, there is a lot to celebrate. Newtown Public Schools are engaging students in rigorous instruction at all levels. We are preparing our students for college and career success. We are providing a holistically supportive learning environment through purposeful, social, and emotional learning opportunities. There are opportunities for growth and improvement achieved through viable and rich curriculum aligned with high standards. And we value qualitative data as much as quantitative. And then I end with a quote: celebrate what you've accomplished, but raise the bar a little higher each time you succeed. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Ann, for this report. I guess my big question to you right now, the one thing that really stood out to me was those kids that in the level 1, level 2, and what's being done to help them advance, because that's where I see the critical need. So if you could speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. So this has been a huge focus of the work that I'm doing with Dr. Porcaro in really digging into the data, because this is a great overview for you all, but we actually have to get down to those individual students and look at who they are, what supports are being provided, and what can we do to help them grow. The majority of students who are performing at level 1 are students who are already receiving special education services. So, and certainly not in all cases, but there's a variety of reasons why those students may be achieving at that level. And sometimes the test itself may not be an appropriate measure of their overall performance. And they are making growth relative to where they have begun, which we can extract from that growth data. As I mentioned in the summary, the level 2 students do appear to be the group that are making the least amount of growth. So a part of what we've been working on, I think Dr. Porcaro has been here maybe 5 weeks, it might even just be a month, is working very closely with the administrators on identifying who those students are and looking at what we're doing for those students. Many of those students are not even students who would necessarily be receiving tiered support through serving. There are kids who are in the classroom who may be underperforming for one reason or another. So what are we actually doing to shine the light on those students when they're in the classroom? In some cases, it's students who were performing at a level 3 or higher and dropped down. So why did that happen? Do they understand, the importance of the test? Was it something an explainable situation in their life? So actually kind of looking at who those students are, but taking it one step further and then developing goals for administrators and teachers around those students to provide support for the teachers as they work with them. Because then what they can do is in their PLCs, they can talk about those students' performance over the course of the year, what kinds of strategies they're using in the classroom, and share that information with each other to hopefully improve their performance overall. And we think that's going to make a big difference.
Any other questions?
John, did you mention something at our last meeting about the curriculum and instruction committee was looking at the number of assessments
that students are taking?
Yes.
He mentioned that, I think, tonight.
Oh.
Yeah.
It seems like
Seems like that was vengeance. We are trying to look at, not so much from the perspective of the number, but if we're giving an assessment, do we really understand why we are giving that assessment? What information are we getting from it? And what are we doing with it? Because if we can't answer those three questions, then we should be discussing why we're giving that assessment in the first place. So that's going to probably be a long process, but it is one that we are looking at closely. Up to a windstorm over there.
I had one more question. Have you noticed the level of the number of students who exhibit test anxiety grow in the last several years? Or is that not a factor?
I could only speak for my experience as a principal. I did not see that, and I have not heard that from the principals in general. I mean, I think at the beginning there was, but our kids are very accustomed to taking computer adaptive or computer-based assessments. So it doesn't, I mean, there are always going to be some children who are affected by that, but it's not a trend.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Clark?
Just want to double check. I'm definitely encouraged with seeing the SAT scores, you know, the percentages jumping from year to year. So that's nice, you know, the chart, I guess, on the end, we're showing where we are ranked compared to everyone else, like in our DER. That's just 1 year, so it's really nice, but at least it's a positive that we've increased. I was just curious are we able to, you know, implement anything to be helping kids prepare for this test at all? And like, I don't know if it's at all the thought being put into, like tomorrow is, you know, freshmen through juniors are taking testing, but like, could they not have homework the night before? Do some certain things to be helping them, you know, it's rather important for, especially for juniors, the testing tomorrow. But you know, obviously this test in March with SATs is a measurement for us. So, you know, if we could be implementing some extra, you know, help for the kids for the SATs to keep us at this top level for it, because I know it's a big measurement and it's very important for children. If there's a way to possibly do that.
Absolutely, and I've only been doing this for a month with the schools back in session, but I can tell you that I've spent a lot of time at the high school, and I know that they have done that, and I know that in particular last year, they spent a lot of time analyzing the data from the previous year and working specifically with students to improve their scores, and they are very excited about the result because they do feel that the work that they put in proved to be effective, and it seems that it has.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I think this came up last year, but just so you know, this is very different than the old SAT, which really was so removed, far removed from the classroom. There was an after school, in most of the high schools, there were after school or even over the summer enrichment courses that you could take to help you prepare. But now this is a state standardized test aligned with Common Core, so it has to be closely aligned with the instruction in the classroom. Yes, you can always get support for any of your courses, but this has to be part of the actual instruction. So that's very different than just getting better preparation for it. You can always have preparation for test taking strategies, and teachers do that every day.
Any other questions? Yep.
I wanted to comment on the grade 11 NGSS. If there's anything we can do to get it to a different grade, because they have the SATs, the ACTs, and I think the kids are going to look at it differently because it's not something that's used to help them get into college, and I think it's going to be a struggle year after year.
I would tend to agree with you, but again, that's a state mandated test situation, so we really don't have much control over it. That's a good point.
I agree with you 100%. I actually wrote a letter 2 years ago, 3 years ago, state wouldn't budge. I agree with you 100%. It's a lot of testing for one grade.
Maybe we could tell our student state board representative to bring back that feedback to the state board. All right. Are there any other questions on this before we move on? I just wanted to say that I think the most important slide in all of this, I'm happy we're using data and that we're looking at it, but I like this. Are we keeping the data in perspective? Are we using data to look at the bigger picture? That all is so important, so I appreciate that that's a part of the whole thing. All right. Thank you so much, because that's very useful. Good information to have. All right, so that brings us to, just going to note that it's 10 o'clock, so, no, we're not leaving, but I want you to know, I want you to ask questions and give comments, but just keep in mind that it's getting late. So that moves us to our old business, the discussion and possible action on the Board of Ed budget goals for 2020-2021. We still have a motion from the last meeting, so we don't need to make a new motion. However, we do have changes that we would need to amend the original motion. So I believe I sent you, does everybody have the new wording that was sent earlier today? All right, so just in the, I'm going to make the motion in the interest of moving this along, but if anybody objects to my doing so, please object away. So given the main motion on the table to approve those assumptions and goals, I guess, are there any other discussion pieces on that before we start adding, subtracting from those? Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we remove the sentence that says maintain a contingency item in the budget for special education enrollment changes and replace it with ensure adequate funding for special education that meets anticipated enrollment and needs and maintains a contingency item in the budget for unanticipated changes in enrollment or needs. No, does that not make sense? Would you like to revise it?
We need to put the motion into effect before we discuss the wording.
I'm making the motion, but somebody needs to second it in order to discuss it.
Second.
All right, so I made the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds it. This is amending the original motion from last week, or 2 weeks ago. So is there any discussion on it? Yes, Mr. Cruson.
The wording seems to have a lot of ands in it and is a bit awkward. I think that second, I think it might be better if it was meet anticipated enrollment and needs as well as maintain a contingency item.
I would be happy to change the wording to include that as well as instead of the and. Are you okay with that? Since you're suggesting it? And as long as nobody's objecting to changing that? Okay, so given that wording, is there any is everybody clear on what the wording change is? Okay, so given that, all those in favor of that amendment to the assumptions and goals? Aye. Any opposed? None. So that passes unanimously. Mr. DeLeo, do you have your? Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to add an item that reads, "Continue to pursue curriculum improvement and innovation in order to ensure that the educational needs of all students are supported."
So Mr. D'Elia made the motion, Ms. Herman States seconds the motion. Is there discussion on that item? I appreciate your bringing that item to our attention because it's very important. All right, so all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None, so that motion passes unanimously. And that brings us, are there any other additions or changes anybody would like to see in the assumptions and goals? So that brings us back to the main motion, which I don't. That the Board of Education approved the Board of Education budget goals for 2020, 2021. I assume the assumptions are in there too, but, okay. So with those amended pieces, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. So that motion passes unanimously. So we now have assumptions and goals for the budget for 2020, 2021. And that brings us to discussion and possible action on a letter to the first selectman regarding the purchase of the property at 27 Churchill Road. Where are we on that? We have, everybody has the letter that Dr. Rodriguez, that we asked her to draft at the last meeting. Would anybody like to, we need a motion just to.
I'll make a motion that the Board of Education direct the superintendent to send a letter to the first selectman regarding the purchase of the property at 27 Churchill Road.
Mr. Stakes makes that motion, Mr. Boros seconds the motion. Is there any discussion or questions on that? Mr. Crusoe.
I did ask the question, well, we had the question previously about the status of the land in the building. If the town uses it, does it revert to someone else's control, specifically Yale's? To the best of my knowledge, as well as my father, who has read through the trust, he, again, this isn't a legal opinion, but to the best of our knowledge, that was a gift to the town. There's no stipulation that would then revert it back to Yale under any conditions. So as far as we know, the town retains the building and the land, even if it stops being a school at some point in the future.
Was that a question too about the field?
Well, the field,
question? All right.
That wasn't part of the question. I mentioned that
Right.
because I know that there is a condition on the fields that if it is not used for recreational use, not specifically school recreation, it has to be available for town recreational use in sports. And if it was ever repurposed into something else, for instance, if we tried to expand the school into it, that land would revert to the Taylor family.
Okay, I knew there was a piece with the playing fields, so thank you for clarifying.
Thank you for getting that background information. Is there any other questions or comments before we vote?
No, I mean, I appreciate you drafting this letter. I think we were all, well, at least I am obviously hesitant because it is a cost of the town, but I think that given the property is available and given what we know about our limitations currently, it's important to look into things fully before we make any sort of decision either way. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I think it lays out the reasons why we'd at least want to explore it as an option.
Mr. D'Elia?
Yeah, I guess I'm in the same boat. I'm concerned because I don't want to commit to spending money, but at the same time, I would like to know what if it's feasible and what the uses would be. So I think I will support this motion.
Okay, any other comments before we vote? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So motion passes unanimously. So that's done. And now we have the discussion and possible action on policy 9,000 roles of board members. We had the motion from the prior meeting that we just wanted to table until this meeting. So that's still in play. And then I think I sent everybody changed wording for that. So I'll make the motion. I'm sorry, this is for policy 9100. Oh, sorry. What am I talking about?
If you're referring to the policy that you had sent the suggested language for, that's, you have it as 9100 on.
So I sent proposed language on two policies. So policy 9000 was in your board packet that you received from Kathy June. And so the wording that was changed that you now see in the packet. So the motion on the table is for the policy that you had in your packet 2 weeks ago. So we need to revise that motion to amend it to what you have in your packet currently this week. So I'll just simply make a motion to amend the main motion to replace the last sentence in point 7 with the wording, the board will receive reports and retirements and will receive reports of retirements and resignations at each regular board meeting and will act on terminations when required by statute or contract.
I'll second that.
So Ms. Herman states seconds the motion, and I'll just say that that was, I ran it by the CABE attorney as well as our own attorney, and they both said that that was a perfect solution to all of the questions that we've had. So we have that reassurance. So are there any questions or comments on that? And then I think the intent is that we not vote on retirements and resignations, but we receive them as part of a report from the superintendent at each meeting, just to clarify. Okay, so all those in favor of the amendment to the motion? Aye. Any opposed? None. So that motion passes unanimously. And then we need to vote on the motion that was from the last meeting, that was the Board of Education approved policy 9,000 roles of board members as in the board packet. That was the board packet last week. So, is that clear? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. So that motion passes unanimously. Moving right along.
So do you want to just go, I mean, I know that there's one policy that we're going to pull out to have a discussion on right away, but we did have two policies, policies 9110 and 9260, that the policy committee had recommended rescinding. We spoke to you about that at the last meeting. So I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Education rescind bylaws 9110 and 9260.
Second.
So Ms. Herman States makes the motion, Mr. Cruzen seconds the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So that passes unanimously.
And so I'm going to make this full motion and then we can amend it. Is that okay, or do you want to just?
Oh. Can you just pull out the?
Well, I don't know. Did anyone? I don't know if anyone had discussion on or any amendments that they wanted to make on any of the other. So we can just do them one by one if you want. I don't want to make the assumption that people don't have any. Okay. So we'll talk about the 9100 first then. Move that the Board of Education move to approve bylaw 9100. So, so this was the policy that you see in front of you that Michelle had some changes on. There was a prior discussion between our former chairperson and our attorneys related to the having the superintendent serve as a temporary chairperson for the election of officers process. According to legal counsel, that's not a practice, that is an approved practice. So Michelle has some suggested amendment language for you to look over. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to look at it. It should be in front of you, passed out to you at this meeting.
I have looked at it. The problem I have with the suggested language is the potential for whoever is running the meeting to be in the running for one of those, and potentially both a potential perceived conflict of interest as well as an inadvertent influence over the voting, because they are presiding over their own election, again, potentially. I understand that legal counsel doesn't like the idea of it being the superintendent, but I think it needs to be a third party at the very least for that reason.
Michelle, can you speak more on what the recommendation and why of the council? Because I tend to agree with Mr. Person in this situation.
I don't know why. It was simply, I was forwarded the information from the previous chair about, the question was, how should we proceed through the election process? And the legal counsel saw the part about the superintendent being the chair. One of our policies said the superintendent would be temporary chair. The other one says the superintendent would be temporary moderator. And I don't know if that makes a difference, if we call it a moderator rather than a chair position. So I guess I would suggest, if there's enough concern about it, that maybe we put this off and ask other.
I mean, I know other boards in town do the election with their membership.
I think they use the
town clerk. I mean, we can look at this further. I think saying moderate the election maybe is better than temporary chair. I think that's a good compromise, but we have a policy committee meeting tomorrow and we can discuss it further and then confer with legal counsel to see what the best practice might be.
I think that would be good. I think maybe we should postpone discussion on this one.
My only concern is I know we have a ticking clock on this one, because we have, 2 board meetings before it needs to be in effect.
Right.
But yeah, I do think it's important to come to a solution, that a good solution, and alleviate at least my concern over it being a third party of some sort, and find out whether it's a language issue or if we actually have to consider a different person to run it.
And we can finalize it in November, because the turnover doesn't happen until December, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I will say too, this policy is a policy that the committee spent a significant amount of time on. It combines multiple policies and puts all the election and all the duties of all the officers under one policy. So it is an important policy that we really want to get in place before the new board is seated.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't notice this at the last meeting. But the other question, the 9120 is the other policy that I think you maybe combined. Do we need to rescind that
I think
one as
that's
well?
the next.
Okay. Okay, so we should probably.
We'll bring back the other policy that coordinates.
So we have a motion on the table to approve 9100. Can we make a motion to? I'll make a motion to postpone this discussion until the next regular board meeting. All right, so all those in favor of postponing it? Aye. Any opposed? None. So that passes unanimously. We'll postpone that motion until the next meeting.
So I make a motion that the Board of Education move to approve bylaw 9125.
Second.
Ms. Harriman States makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds. Is there any discussion? All of those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That one passes unanimously.
Make a motion that the Board of Education approve bylaw 9140.
Second.
Ms. Harriman States makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds. Is there any discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And so that passes unanimously.
Make a motion that the Board of Education move to approve bylaw 9221.
Second.
Ms. Harriman States makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds. Any questions or comments on this policy? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None, so that passes unanimously.
I'll make a motion that the Board of Education move to approve bylaw 9230.
Second.
Ms. Harriman States makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds. Any questions or comments on that policy? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None, so that motion passes unanimously.
And I'll move that the Board of Education approve bylaw 9240.
Second.
Ms. Harriman States makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. Are there any questions on this one last policy? None. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None, so that one passes unanimously as well. And that brings us to our new business, the action on the Newtown Federation of Teachers contract.
I'll move that the Board of Education approve the ratified Newtown Federation of Teachers contract.
Second.
Ms. Harriman States makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. Just briefly before we vote on this, I just wanted to speak to the negotiation process and how productive it was. I really felt like this was an excellent negotiating experience, and a lot of time was spent talking and listening to each other. Most importantly, listening to each other's concerns and working out solutions. And I also wanted to thank the Legislative Council and Board of Finance members who invested their time in this process as well, because I think it really just was a good process overall. Are there any other comments or questions, Mr. Clerk?
I have more of a comment. I want to personally thank Michelle, Rebecca, and Dan for representing the board. I know it was a lot of late evenings and a lot of time put into it, and I personally thank them for putting in such an effort, and also appreciate the updates that we got as a board. I can at least say that we did get updates. I can't really speak to it, I don't think, but we did get updates, and we were able to ask questions along the way. Even this evening prior to it, that we were afforded the opportunity to ask questions that were answered. So thank you to the three of you.
Thank you for saying that. All right, any other comments before we vote? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. The motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to our public participation, our second public participation. Is there anybody who'd like to come up and address the board? We have a microphone somewhere. One comment. Can you just, we know who you are, but can you just, for the record?
Deborah Dukowski, 4 Cornfield Ridge Road. One comment about the start of the meeting, or the voting, sorry, it's very late, and 3 questions for you. Now, I recall, and Dan, you can help me because we were both on the Charter Revision Commission, that the town clerk is considered an independent, non-connected person that is used for the voting of officers, and it seems to have worked well for the legislative council, which by most accounts is probably the most political council in town. And it would seem something that might work also here. And that way there's not even any chance perhaps of, of any skewing of elections. So just that comment. So the question I have for the fellow who did the population projection. Now, one of the things that was always my beef with the population projections was very well articulated by this fellow. You can only go by the last 5 years worth of experience. You can't project economic changes. You can't really project social changes or things to that effect. And so what you saw, the Chung study was done in 2007, which meant it took into account the years 2001 through 2006, which, as you saw, had tremendous growth. And 2007 is when the stock market crashed. And so what we saw as a result of that, which you called out rightly, is Chung's projections were well high of what the actual procedure was. And mathematically, that's very understandable as to why that would have happened. Then we saw a 2013 projection by MMMI or whatever that was, I couldn't quite see it. And that projection was following the years of 2007 to 2012, which was, of course, crash of the stock market and recession. So its trajectory was all downhill, and it continued that trajectory. And so what we saw was those numbers completely undershot what the actual population was, as one would expect, reasonably speaking, because of just the premises on which these models are built. So my question for at this point, we're sort of in this stagnant limbo. We're not going up as quickly as prior to Chung. We're not going down as quickly as prior to the MMMI. Financial analysts are basically saying we've got a recession coming in a year or two. They all, you hear that talk. So how should we interpret these projections if indeed a recession should happen? So that would be my question. Because again, we can't say, well, Chung shows us, something, and we can't say that MMI shows us something, because we're just in a completely different area right now. Okay, I have two other questions, but I'm willing to, okay. So moving on to performance.
If you have, I'm just trying to stay with our 3-minute time frame in terms of public comment. I don't know how much more you have, but if you have a lot, maybe you could submit it to us by email.
Does that 3 minute, is it only once that a person can only talk for 3 minutes? Or if, say, I ask a question, somebody else comes up, asks a question, then I can ask another question?
No, you only get 3 minutes once.
Okay. Well, that's a pity then. Okay, because what I understand, how much time do I have left?
It's been 4 minutes, but I will say we went back and forth here for a minute. So what is your next question?
I understand there's been a big effort on math curriculum over the last 5 years or so. Have we measured the impact of that math curriculum on the performance that we've seen recently? Do we know what that is? The other questions about the APs, speaking as a daughter who failed one of those APs and was very happy she did because she learned how to study afterwards. What I'm curious about is the percentage of people who take AP tests who actually get a 3 or higher. And if that percentage has changed, the question is, what's going on behind that? And that's the end of the 3 questions.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dennis Brestavansky, 11 Longview Heights Road. I have no questions. I just have a comment to make, which I wasn't sure was going to fit tonight, but then I think the question Mr. McClure asked is similar to what I've been hearing from other parents. There seems to be a significant amount of parents who are concerned for the change in grading policy at the high school. And I'm going to say it's perception that things have changed. But there's a pretty loud voice out there of concern about it. The way folks are interpreting the change is that there's now a minimum amount of testing that's required and a maximum amount of homework or non-text testing that's allowed in the construction of a grade. And some people have observed, based on their experience with students who are no longer in the high school, or who may still be but have moved on, that the implementation of that policy in some cases has resulted in the degree to which homework or non-time-based testing matters has fallen to a very low level, much below 40%. That's perception. I don't know if that's reality. If we're going to rely upon Power School to be the communication vehicle to show the parents that, really there's a lot of homework in the grade here, etc., Power School grades would need to, assignments for the entire year would need to be posted now, and I'm not sure that's realistic. I think most of the faculty don't post their entire quarter's grades or assignments at the beginning of the marking period. My recommendation would be just to have some more communication about this, maybe a follow-up letter from the principal or whoever the appropriate entity is to describe really what's going on, what the philosophy is, what's behind it. I'm sure that's already been done once, but there's just enough of a voice that continues to be out there that it's probably worth addressing and make sure people understand really why there's a change. With respect to the data that was shared on enrollment, I can't help but make 3 comments. I just can't beat the engineer out of myself. You really should have error bars on those things when you're looking 10 years out. At a minimum, there should be a comment made on what is the margin of error in the analysis, because you're looking at relatively small absolute numbers that could swing or be within the margin of error. Similarly, in the private school enrollment, we saw 2 numbers. One was like 600 something falling to 520. I think it's important to look at that as a percentage of the current enrollment, because I think the current enrollment has dropped a lot. So if we're going to draw any conclusions from that, looking at it as a percentage of total enrollment would be important. And the final thing, which Dan asked about, sorry, I don't remember if it's Delia or Delia, forgive me. With a name like Restavansky, I should know. The Connecticut data and the Newtown data were plotted on the same graph with the same vertical axis. I'm not sure what the Connecticut state data meant, because it certainly wasn't the same absolute number that was on the vertical scale. So if you're going to draw conclusions from the relative slopes, that could be misleading. Sorry, I just couldn't resist but bring those up, because they did seem to be points of conversation or points of emphasis, and if you don't look at it in that way, you might come to a conclusion that's different than the one you want. Thank you for listening, but I really do care about the grading thing, because there's a lot of noise out there that maybe doesn't need to be if it's communicated away.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? No? So we'll close out public comment. Brings us to the closing meeting. Anybody cares to make a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Mr. Crusoe makes the motion, Mr. Cooper seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. We are adjourned.
Sloppy way of trying to make a point. A sloppy way of trying to make a point.